be on time, so we'll let others in while they come in. But my name is Sendhil Krishnan. Jeff and I are both co-founders of MD Senior Living. And we've been doing a series of webinars and educational talks. I have some content on our site. And if you guys need the link, I'm sure you guys have it by now, but there's a couple of webinars on how we got started and how we grew and kind of getting into nitty-gritties about running assisted living homes, especially based on our experience and what we went through. And I kind of wanted to give a different perspective, which is really Jeff's perspective. He's done a phenomenal job about operations, really growing and scaling and all sorts of things that, it's just very hard for anyone to comprehend without being on the ground or understanding that. So I thought Jeff would really give his background and expertise on that. So feel free to ask him questions or whatever along the way. This is really just a Q&A format. I'm going to have him give a little background on his experience, and really I have a little slide deck here that we can sort of touch on, just talking about our values and what we want to accomplish as our group, but also what the opportunities are in residential assisted living, and if that's something that you guys really should be interested in, or how you can start to get involved. But here, I'll hand it over to Jeff. I'll put myself on mute, and Jeff, if you need something, just let me know.
Great, sounds good. Well, first of all, like Sendhil said, I think some of the most valuable information in these sort of talks and presentations can come through Q&A. So definitely feel free to interrupt me with any questions, to ask any questions, as I think that will make sure that we cover areas that are of specific interest to you guys. So what I would say is, just as far as my background, I'll give you a quick background. I've been in the senior care space now for about 12 years. And I was fortunate to meet Sendhil along the way, and we together co-founded MD Senior Living. Before that time, I was involved in the in-home care space, which is really a non-real estate focused area of senior care where our agency would provide caregivers into the homes of seniors. And so I don't have a clinical background, I have a business background, and I'm kind of the one of the key members of our group that really isn't a physician or doesn't have a clinical background. So I came up through normal business channels. I worked for IBM initially and got some great training through that organization, and later found myself out in the Phoenix market, where I was introduced to the senior care space. Like I said, I spent some time in in-home care. And during that time, really came across the residential assisted living model. And it was very interesting to me because, one, it incorporated real estate, but secondly, it really dovetailed and had a lot of synergy with the in-home care space. And so what I did at the time was I launched my first RAL before I had met Sendhil, while I was still running the home care agency. And then ended up meeting Sendhil, and from there we really started to grow and develop the RAL business model. Along the way, I sold off my interest in the home care side, and later kind of got back into home care a little bit as well. So I've really been focused primarily on senior care for the past 12 years. We also started a charity now about 7 years ago that really focuses on helping low-income seniors who are going through a crisis or a hardship, and you really can't get the help that they need, and we step in and we help them out. So all of that, everything I'm doing now is really senior care related, and I really enjoy it. So it's been a good journey for me. So with that being said, what I thought I would just start about talking on a few points that are some of the key questions that people generally ask when they're just learning about RALs. And really one of the first ones is around the demand for the services. And Sendhil has likely talked about the demand for the services. Since I've been in senior care, I've seen the demand for senior care services in general really expand quite a bit. Obviously we have the baby boomer demographic that is really coming into play. It's also often called the silver tsunami. What we're finding is that, well, the oldest baby boomers are about 76 years old right now. And generally people start needing this type of care around their early 80s, whether we're talking about in-home care or residential assisted living. And so we're really on the cusp of some very significant demand, really an explosion in the need for this type of service and this type of housing. So we really feel like we're positioned in a good spot. But when somebody has a family member that is aging and that is starting to need care, there's really a few different choices that they have. And I've kind of seen all facets of these choices. The first one is they can utilize family. You know, a lot of times we'll have individuals where they will, if the aging parent is living alone, maybe they're going to move in with their daughter or their son, and they have the ability, the family has the ability to rally and to really provide the care that's needed. But there's a lot of times and a lot of reasons why that can't take place. Sometimes geography doesn't work out. Sometimes people are living very busy lives and it just doesn't make sense. That's where they really have a couple different options. One of those options is in-home care that I was talking about briefly, where they can have a caregiver come into their home. But the problem with in-home care is it's quite expensive. So when I was actively involved with in-home care out here, we would have individuals that would utilize services for 4 hours a day, or maybe 6 hours a day, or 8 hours a day. And that was expensive to utilize it that way. But when they had an event that occurred, maybe they had a fall or they had a stroke or some type of hospitalization, and they suddenly were in need of really having some level of care 24/7. We did offer that as an in-home care provider, but really what individuals would have to pay is north of $20,000 a month in order to have that one-on-one care. So for the majority of individuals, when it gets to that level, it really is not feasible for them to stay at home and to be able to have that one-on-one care. So that's when a lot of people end up looking at assisted living. Some people will bypass the in-home care altogether and they'll just head into some kind of group living. But a lot of times people will try and stay at home for a little bit, but then the costs become prohibitive. And that's a lot of times where they'll move into to assisted living. When they get to assisted living, there's really a couple different options. Some of you, probably all of you, have seen some of these big box assisted living communities. There's some very nice communities. Some of them really are patterned after resort living. I mean, a lot of nice amenities, a lot of nice social activities to keep the residents busy and engaged. The problem generally that you have with those larger big box communities is that their caregiver ratio to residents is at a level that it's difficult for the caregivers to be very responsive to the needs of those residents. So what you have is you have situations where you might have, yeah, here we go on the screen on the left is an example of a big box community. So you might have a situation where somebody is really doing well in that big box community, but eventually their needs start to change. They have some cognitive decline or they have some physical decline. And if they need assistance on a regular basis and they're pressing their call button and it's taking that caregiver maybe half an hour, 45 minutes or an hour to get to them, very quickly that situation becomes problematic. And so we have a lot of individuals that will go from the big box communities into the residential assisted living communities, because when we're talking about out in Arizona, we're typically licensed for 10 residents. You have a couple caregivers that are there throughout the majority of the day. So the care is very close by, it's very responsive, it's very customizable to what their needs are. So whereas the big box communities have a lot of nice amenities and they are really a good fit for a lot of individuals, but as those individuals start to have greater needs, especially more physical needs, then it becomes much more advantageous for them to look at a more responsive environment like residential assisted living. So that's just a little background about our space, about why people go into assisted living, and about the differences between the two different types of assisted living. But really the reason why you're seeing such a level of growth in the number of RALs in Arizona, certainly, but throughout the country, is because it is meeting a need that really hasn't been met previously. So again, people have really struggled eventually in those big box environments. Now that they have the option to be able to move into a smaller, more responsive environment, it really is a good option for a lot of individuals. So Senthil, that was just a little background. If you want to jump in at all or kind of guide the discussion, I'm happy.
No, absolutely. I mean, do you want to talk anything else about, I think you probably already covered that, the baby boomer, we're basically in the silent generation. So which is the generation before the baby boomers that are actually currently in assisted living. So the baby boomers represent a huge population growth and demand that's to come for at least the next, I would say 2 decades. Assisted living itself, assisted living overall as a sector has done quite well, despite recessions, despite the Great Recession from over 12 years ago. And even presently, I mean, the needs their needs don't change simply because of the economy. So it's very recession proof in that aspect. And if you look at assisted living returns compared to a lot of the other commercial sectors, regardless of what it is, multifamily, whatever it is, right? Assisted living has outperformed all of those and senior living in general. Do you want to touch on here?
I'll just jump in real quick and say, a couple things that I personally really like about residential assisted living. One is that it's based around real estate. And so anytime that you can leverage real estate with a nice profitable business, it's really a kind of turbocharges the whole financial situation. The other thing I'll mention just on a personal note is this business is really all about serving individuals. I think a lot of you guys are physicians or have clinical careers. So serving people, you're no stranger to that. And that's really what you guys have based your careers around. I came from an environment of strictly business and transactions. And when I had the ability to get into senior care, it was really an opportunity to come into an environment where you could still do very well financially, but at the end of the day, it was really about serving people and trying to create a better life and better quality of life for those individuals. So it's an enjoyable pursuit, and we're always striving to make our life better for our residents, to make the environments better. So it's been an enjoyable journey, just moving through this whole RAL space.
Absolutely. I can't, I've done multiple types of real estate investments and projects, and I still continue doing just to diversify. But there's nothing really more gratifying than walking into a residential assisted living home and just seeing residents being taken care of, So I think that's just a very gratifying feeling. Jeff, what I'm going to do is I've gotten a bunch of questions that people have asked. So great. I'm just going to throw them at you. We also have a chat screen, so you guys are welcome to either ask them out loud or throw them in there if you have a question, and then we'll also look at the chat screen and answer your questions. But I just want to start with just a very higher level look. If someone was looking to try to start an assisted living home, Jeff, where would you start? What would you do?
I think a lot of it, if I were to start to do it on my own and I was just starting from scratch, I think the first step is really to start to make connections in the local senior care community, because that's where I met Senthil, and that's where we've continued to meet a number of individuals that have played an important role in our growth as an organization. So getting to know the right people, getting to know people who are interested in doing the same things. A lot of times they're going to be bringing different strengths than what you have to offer. And I think that's kind of been the story of how we got started. I mean, of course, anywhere that you can find educational material, and what Senthil is doing here in terms of providing information, I think is very, very helpful. That's another key area to focus on is there's starting to be more and more information available about residential assisted living and senior care in general. So, I mean, I would become a sponge as it relates to information that's out there and that's available in regards to residential assisted living, but really, kind of diving in. And you might say, okay, that sounds great. How do you meet people in this industry? If depending on where you are in the country, it's very likely that there's a lot of senior care related networking groups in your area. And so you could just, by doing some Google searches, you can find some networking groups where you can just show up, just kind of take it in, listen, see who the players are, and really start to figure, okay, maybe there's somebody that I'd like to strike up a conversation with. I think, that's they have an interesting background and they might, be able to give me some good guidance. And so when you're new, I think people appreciate somebody who's new coming in, just wanting to learn. And people in this industry tend to be very giving. And I think you would find that they would be happy to try and share some wisdom with you and, explain what they know. And if the situations are right, then to, develop partnerships or, find ways to work together.
Yeah, and Jeff, what would you say are sort of the key players in an assisted living home? Like, who should you be looking for?
Yeah. Well, there are individuals where you have residential assisted living, you're going to have individuals that are managers. They're essentially the assisted living managers that are running these homes on a day-to-day basis. And so anybody who has that title, an assisted living manager, is going to be very knowledgeable about this space. They're going to be knowledgeable about the rules and regulations in your state. And they're certainly going to be a good contact. Another type of contact would be a placement agent. So placement agents are individuals that really their whole job is trying to connect families who have an aging loved one that needs to be placed into either a large assisted living or small residential assisted living. And they're going to make that connection. And they get paid from the assisted living organization. It's free to the family, free to the senior, but their whole job is really to function as a senior care consultant and to help families find the right options. So that is a growing profession. There's a growing amount of individuals that are doing that, depending on the markets that you're in. But those would be two good individuals that really would be very knowledgeable about assisted living and the various options and professions around assisted living.
Yeah, and I think I think one of the main things is don't worry about getting a house first. That's probably one of the last things you need to worry about. The first thing, if I was doing this from scratch, is I would start with getting a manager, or in some states they're known as administrators. And because they're really going to help guide you through this process, especially if you're starting from scratch. And Jeff's right, the second key player is also the placement agent, and not just for referrals. And both of these people can kind of tell you what the demand is in your area. It's almost like getting a market appraisal study being done, or a market with a research survey being done. But these are people on the ground that'll tell you, hey, listen, there's a huge demand on the east side of town because we don't have any homes, but we get a lot of calls. On the west side, there's a ton of competition. Don't worry there. So guess what? Now you're going to start focusing on the east side of town. They may say things like, well, you know what? It's actually memory care that we need. We don't have enough memory care facilities. Can you make sure that your staff is trained in that, or you get a special license if you need it? So, these are people that it's not like you're trying to necessarily hire them for working, but it's just a matter of just connecting with them, maybe even just taking them out to dinner or lunch and just picking their brains, because one day they may realize that they may end up coming to work for you. And if you're a physician and you're offering that medical expertise, they understand the value of that. So that's kind of one of those places that I would start as before you bother to look for a house or where you're going to look. I would say try to get your team in place. Team members on the team also include caregivers. Now, Jeff, can you talk a little bit about the challenges with having caregivers, especially in this day and environment, and what we're doing to mitigate that?
One of the more challenging parts of the business, and this is something that a lot of industries are facing, and I think throughout healthcare they're facing staffing shortages, and we're not immune from that. What I would say is that there's a lot of traditional advertising that's done, meaning we typically advertise on boards like Indeed and ZipRecruiter. that's a way that we will kind of attract candidates. We also are active in local Facebook groups, and that can help us to get connected with caregivers. But the real trick is creating a culture and creating an environment where the caregivers feel valued and communicated with, and they're really an important part of the equation, because they truly are an important part of the equation. And if they're treated well, and caregivers generally hang out with caregivers. And so if you have a good caregiver, to talk to them and to say, hey, what friends do you have that might be interested in working for our organization? You know, we're going to be launching a new home that's over in this area. You know, do you have anybody that you could refer us to? A lot of times they will refer individuals to us. And we also have bonus programs with the employees to encourage them to refer us. And so not only do they, you know, are they happy to refer their friends because they like working in our environment, but they're also going to get a bonus on that, and it can be some extra income for them. So we try and make it a win-win for everybody. But that internal recruiting has really become a significant part of where we find our employees, and a very important part, because generally we're getting high quality employees through that through that sort of word of mouth.
Got it. And can you talk a little bit about the staffing? Like, how do you know what to staff during the day versus night?
Yeah. The general model is you're going to have 12-hour shifts. You're going to have 2 caregivers working during the day. You're going to have 1 caregiver working at night. We like to have essentially an awake staff, which is what I just described. There are other scenarios that you can, other ways that RALs will staff their homes. Sometimes they'll have live-in caregivers where essentially everybody is sleeping at night, including the caregivers. But if there's an emergency or if somebody needs help, the expectation is those caregivers are going to get up and they're going to help. We have become known for really having awake staff, which for a lot of families is very important. I mean, there's times where the seniors will enter our home and they sleep at night just fine, and there's not a lot of concern about the night staff. But there's other times where maybe there's cognitive decline and somebody's getting up in the middle of the night fairly often. There might be some confusion, and to really have awake staff there becomes important in those situations. And so generally it's 2 during the day, 1 at night. There's certainly times where we staff up more than that if we have really high acuity residents that we feel that in order to support the caregivers and what they're doing, sometimes we need to add in extra people. But that 2 during the day, 1 at night is the sort of the standard configuration.
Awesome. Talk to us about the liabilities that are associated with having a care home.
This is a subject that gets talked about a lot. We've been fortunate. We have not had any experience with, you know, any kind of issues. I think the ways that you mitigate the liabilities is by having very solid insurance, you know, having plenty of liability insurance and professional insurance. We work closely with a broker who really is focused on the RAL space and in the assisted living space. And so she's done a good job for us in connecting us with carriers that are very familiar with our environment. We also just recently made the move to put in an umbrella policy because we have a larger number of properties now. So not only does each home have their own insurance, but we have an umbrella policy over all of the homes, which, you know, fortunately we haven't had a cause to use, and we've never had to rely on the insurance. But certainly, as in any business, and especially in healthcare, it's always possible that there could be an event where you know, a lawsuit could be filed, or somebody could you know, make a claim against insurance, and so we always want to be careful there.
Yeah, and I think, like, if we look at liability, I think physicians are always more concerned because they don't want to become a target for attorneys, especially for frivolous suits. So one of the things that I think about is it's not just, you know, I think about, so I've come up with something called the 3 C's, which is basically care, conditions, and culture. And so what that means is, like, first of all, like, if you have poor caregiving, right? If you're not hiring properly, if you're not hiring the right kind of caregivers and vetting them, and they're obviously giving poor caregiving, right? If someone calls for help and they keep calling, and then they need to go to the bathroom, so they try to get out of bed and they fall and fracture their hip. That's a condition of poor care right there. If you look at environment, so poor conditions in the home, like poor work conditions. So meaning like, for me, that means like there's poor lighting. Maybe there's not enough grab bars. Maybe there's slip hazards throughout the home. Maybe there's rugs. Maybe there's furniture that's not bolted or, that's rolling. So things that can actually create a hazard. That's in the conditions of the environment that need to be modified and changed. Not having ramps, for instance, right? So you want to obviously try to make it as much handicap accessible, even though homes do not need to be ADA compliant. Okay, so that's just something to remember. Finally, culture, right? Your work culture. What is that culture of that environment like? If you have a poor work culture, right? If you have caregivers that are fighting with each other and just trying to compete, because they're being marginalized by their staff and their managers, then you create this very toxic environment that spills over into care. Someone may be thinking like, okay, I don't want to check on that person because it should be Sally's job, and Sally's thinking, no, it should be Ed's job. So then you have this, where you have this fragmented situation. So just because mom gets up and breaks her hip, that may be unavoidable. But if she gets up and breaks her hip because you have poor caregiving, because you have a poor culture in your home, and because you have poor conditions, then guess what? You are more likely to be sued. Accidents happen, things can happen. It's not unexpected. These are residents that are 80s and 90s. Some of them have dementia. Some are always, agitated, or there's sundowning involved. There are some things that you just cannot control. But if you have these things on top of that, then you're more likely to have issues with lawsuits and things like that. And that should really come as no surprise. That's the same in medicine that we see in hospitals, right? We have physicians that get sued because, mistakes happen. It's not necessarily their fault, but how they deal with it and how they interact with the family and the patient, just saying sorry has been shown to reduce the likelihood of someone being sued. So having the liability, but remembering that there's all this stuff that goes before it as well. And the fourth C that I forgot is communication. Families really want feedback and communication from staff members and managers. They want to know, hey, how's mom doing? And I'm talking about not after an incident, but I'm talking about even before, when they enter, like, hey, a nice text, just a random text, like, hey, your mom really enjoyed banana bread, like she's having a good time. Here's a text of her like dancing, here's her having this fun, They really appreciate that. And that goes a long way, especially if something untoward happens. They'll be more understanding and appreciative that, hey, people were open, communicative, and were being honest with everything else. That makes sense?
And I'll just second that. That's exactly right. That when we establish good trust with the families, and when we are communicating with them on a regular basis, it really paves the way for us to work through any issues that may come up. And there are times where individuals will have falls, or individuals will have incidents, and our ability to respond to the families quickly, really have good communication through that process, really explain all the options to them. We find that generally the families are just extremely grateful, even in the difficult situations. And so I think establishing that trust and that frequent communication goes a long way towards ensuring that you keep problems at bay.
Perfect, yes. Jeff's question is, excuse me, Jeff. Jack's first question, I'll just kind of run through the chats. How do you find a Jeff?
Great question. So I think it comes back to the networking. I think if you have identified the area that you want to create an RAL, really the more you can get ingrained with that local senior care community, the more you're going to have an opportunity to find somebody that is, has the same interests, has the same vision as you for what you're trying to do. And, that's where partnerships happen. And so I think that networking part is very, very important. You learn a lot through the process, and you also meet people that potentially can be good partners.
Yeah, thanks. No one asked, how do you find a Centel? That's okay. I totally get it. We talked about caregivers and online. Yes. talked about risk and risk mitigation activities. What are some of the activities that we're offering at some of the homes, Jeff?
Yeah, so activities are very important. Families, they want to know that their loved one is not going to be just sitting there in front of the TV. And so activities are very important. Things like live music, we bring in live music on a weekly basis. There's a lot of games, we bring out games and puzzles. We leverage technology. So we have in our homes, we have something called Birdsong, which is an application. It's basically a tablet application, but it has a lot of content that's very interesting to seniors, anything from trivia to virtual travel to old TV shows and old movies and commercials. We also have the ability to program those with videos, say YouTube videos that are very in line with what their interests are. So if you have somebody who's very interested in polka dancing, we can download a bunch of YouTube videos about polka dancing and put it on the Birdsong tablet, and it allows them to spend time viewing and learning and kind of reminiscing about things that they're interested in. Music is big. We typically will in the rooms of all the residents who are interested in our music program, we'll put in an Echo Show, which is the Amazon version of the Alexa units. They're little video units and they have great sound, so they're great for music. So we have one of our staff members that'll come in, they'll sit down with a resident, they'll really understand what type of music she likes or he likes, who their favorite artists are, what their favorite songs are, and we'll program playlists for them so that the caregivers can very easily walk into the room and say, hey, Alexa, play Mr. Smith's favorite songs. And it just is a more enjoyable environment when they get to listen to a lot of the songs that they grew up with. And so
Mr. Smith Deluxe Edition by LL Cool J.
music is a big part of that as well. I have Alexa here, she's talking to me now. So it's like it's starting some music. But anyway, there's a lot of different types of activities, bingo and group activities like that. We do activities that require physical movement. So a lot of times there'll be simple games that we're playing that require physical movement with say like a beach ball or different types of items. So really, there's a lot of different things we can do to get creative. A lot of it depends upon the interests of the residents themselves. Let me take this moment just to give a little philosophy of our care, because this relates to activities. And Sento brought it up here. So we have what we call the 4 keys to successful aging. And really, this is based on a decade-long study that was done by an organization called the MacArthur Foundation. And really, they took these 10 years and they studied just hundreds of different individuals that were going through the aging process. They were seniors, and they looked at what causes some people really to thrive during the aging process, where other people really don't thrive. And they came up with really 4 key areas. First one is make sure there's movement or exercise on a daily basis. And that's just what we were talking about, whether it's chair yoga, whether it's walking around the yard, whether it's some level of movement, that's always important. Second is incorporate mental stimulation into your daily routine. So again, we use technology for that. We'll use games and puzzles and interactions. The third one is to really maintain your social network and maintain contact with them. So family and friends, when people tend to feel isolated, that's when their mental health tends to really spiral down. And so we do a lot to bring family in to the homes. We do a lot to connect them through technology and FaceTime. That's an important part. And the last one is maintain a sense of purpose. So for our residents to really maintain a strong sense of purpose, the way I like to describe it is when they wake up in the morning, we want them every day to really be looking forward to something. That might be something that's faith-based, it might be hobbies that they have, it might be relationships that they're going to be talking with that individual that day. but giving them something to look forward to every day, having that purpose is an important part of really thriving during the aging process. So those are all factors when we're working through the plan of care, when we're working through the activities for the residents. We want to make sure that those elements are there and a part of the routine.
Perfect. Sarisha asked about other training programs to train the caregivers.
Yeah, there's some good training programs. We're fortunate in that the gal who is our director of operations was a hospice nurse for 18 years. And so she has that clinical background. She's very good at training. So we do a lot of one-on-one on the job training, but we also have a database of a lot of great content for our caregivers. And so we really expect the caregivers on a very regular basis, month in, month out, to be going through training through these modules. And so there's a couple different organizations that put out great training, online training program, and it's really not very expensive. So, I mean, for us, the investment, I think, is maybe $80 a month or so. And we get access for all of our caregivers to have some great training to work through modules. You know, if we have somebody coming into the home and they're struggling with Alzheimer's, there's really some great training based around Alzheimer's and dementia. And so we'll kind of give a refresher for the caregivers that way. So training is a very good question, and it's a very important part of the process.
Perfect. Pratap wanted to know about legal services. Do you have a contract for residents, or do you use a legal service for them, or how you get or is it a lease? Like, I think he's probably trying to understand like how that model works.
Yeah, we have a resident agreement, which essentially you could think of as a lease, and it outlines the type of care that will be provided. It talks about what we can and can't do under the licensing of the state. And it just, it outlines the residents' rights. And it talks about, how you would terminate the relationship if somebody wanted to move out. It really kind of lists all the pertinent information. A lot of that is dictated by the state in terms of what needs to be in there, but then we have some elements in there that we put in there as well. So we did engage with an attorney early on to make sure that our agreements were sound in the way that we had structured them, but that was now multiple years ago, and we really don't have a cause to utilize an attorney typically for the paperwork anymore on a day-to-day basis.
Got it. So I presume that's something you just copy and paste for every resident?
It is. That's correct.
Okay.
And we use DocuSign. So a lot of times our residents will have the power of attorney that maybe lives somewhere else. And so having DocuSign where we can send those agreements to them and they can sign it remotely, electronically is a convenient way of doing that.
And then Pratap also asked, do you have a separate LLC for business and real estate, which, we do, but can you kind of explain?
Yeah, great question.
And what the reason for that is?
Yeah, that goes back to mitigating your potential liabilities that was asked earlier. And that is a part of the equation as well. From the beginning, we set up separate entities for the operating business and separate entities for the real estate. And that's really just, for a risk mitigation process of keeping things separate. The attorneys from the beginning basically showed us that structure, that was the best way to set up these sort of entities. So every home that we open up is going to have two entities, one for the operating entity and one for the real estate.
And yeah, typically what happens is the home is paying a lease to the real estate. Even if it's the same person owning both entities, you're going to have two separate LLCs. And that really comes back to a lot of tax strategy where you can write off a lot against the real estate. But you're also getting advantages from owning the business and being an actual material participant. So you're getting a passive write-off on the real estate side for passively getting the income, but you're also being actively involved, which is by the IRS, it's not called active, but it's called non-passive. So you're materially participating in the business. So if you have your own home, you can actually get deductions in both sense. When you have deductions on the real estate side, against the depreciation, things like that. It's called depreciation. The same depreciation you can take on the business side for expenses there, but in that side it's called amortization. So you can get deductions both ways you can use that to write off against you use the potential losses that you get, tax losses against your own potential income that you're making as a physician. So a lot of advantages for having a residential assisted living, because you're getting the best of having a business and you're getting the best of having real estate. And if you're, if you've read the Rich Dad Poor Dad series and you understand the cash flow quadrant, this puts you on squarely on the right side of that cash flow quadrant, right? So you're not, you have a business that employs people, and you're also an investor in the real estate. So profound like tax benefits. Plus, you're doing, your chance to use your medical background, and you're doing something great for seniors, providing them housing that they desperately need to. Questions there?
Yeah, in order to have a tax write-off for your, like, let's say your W-2 income as a physician or your 1099 income as a physician, do you need to claim real estate professional status and therefore have more than 750 hours or 500 material participation?
No, I'm finding out that like you have to be careful with that. If you have a full-time physician job and you try to claim reps, you're really setting yourself up for a really good audit, unless you can really document and prove that, hey, you were doing, because really it's got to be more than your full-time job that you're doing real estate professional stuff. But there is another designation where I think it's non-passive, meaning like you're actively involved in the business, where you don't have to get the rep status. And, simply having, things like short-term rentals can really help count towards that. But obviously having an RAL, just being a landlord of a property is not going to cut it, because most times you have property management, or you're not really going to materially participate. But if you have a business, then you can. Dr. Favoli, I hope I'm saying that right, but she's looking to. Okay, perfect. So do you want to ask your question and maybe expand upon that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about REL now for 2 years. I was gonna get started right before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, no, let's hold off. So I'm really glad that you said it. Talking about this right now, I'm looking at probably starting out with buying one, just because the logistics of getting one actually set up just seems a little more daunting with the permits and neighborhood approvals and things like that. So I'm just wondering that from your standpoint, if you're going to buy an existing one, what are some things that you'd be looking for? I mean, I've looked at P&Ls and all of that, but are there certain questions that only someone who has already run an REL, will be asking, that I should be asking?
And can you tell me a little bit about where you're at and what a little bit about the REL that you're looking at itself?
So I'm based in Syracuse, New York, but I've looked really all around the country. Like the one that I'm actively looking at right now is in Scottsdale, I believe. I have in my mailbox something from probably Maine as well, but I'm thinking probably in the Arizonas, maybe Florida, kind of like more southern states where seniors are more likely to go down to. Now I know there are seniors everywhere, but somehow it just seems like those are more more marketable areas. So that will also mean that I'm remote operating these. So just any thoughts that you have about thinking about this whole process and what's next.
Jeff, do you want to start, and then maybe
Yeah, I think it was something that Sendhil mentioned before. If you're remote and looking to start an RAL or to purchase an existing one, it's very, very important that you have a good manager and somebody that you trust and have a great working relationship with, because it's one thing if you're close by and you can be stopping in and checking on it on a regular basis, but if you're across the country, you really want to find somebody that you have a good rapport with, that you trust, that really they have the right level of experience. And there's certainly those people out there. So you can certainly find them. You just want to invest the time to make sure that you do find the right ones.
And what is part of her due diligence in scoping out an REL, regardless of where it is?
Yeah, one of the things that we like to do, and we talked a little bit before about placement agents. So if you can get in contact with some placement agents and get a feel for, having that local expertise where as Senda was describing before, they said, hey, there's a lot of demand on the east side, but there's really not many homes there now. The west side is very saturated, or maybe north, south. If you can have individuals that can help point you in the right direction and let you know the type of RALs that are needed and what part of town is going to be the best bet for you, where you get the most bang for your buck, that's going to be invaluable information for you. So cultivating some of those relationships up front would be very helpful. When we actually find an RAL that's for sale, you certainly want to be looking at the P&L and the tax returns. You want to get the existing rent rolls to understand what the current residents are paying on a monthly basis. And, as much as you can really kind of compare the rent rolls to the current expense structure, and just not to say that you're going to run it the same way that they did, but a lot of times it could be very helpful just to see what that situation looks like. If there is a home that's currently getting no more than $3,000 a month in rent per resident versus one that's getting maybe 5, 6, 65, 7,000, you're gonna probably see that there's a pretty big difference between those properties. And so when you start to look at the numbers, it's going to give you a good indication, I think, as to what you're looking at.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, some of the things that we look at is obviously the rent roll compared to what it could potentially be doing in that market. Just by taking over and sprucing up the place. If it's been outdated for a while, sprucing up the place will actually attract a lot more residents who are willing to pay a little bit more to try to get into that home. Having a reputation behind that obviously helps. So you want to try to, the best value add, you want to try to find these value add properties, right? So where homes are underperforming relative to what they could be doing. And so some of the RALs that we've purchased, especially last year, we purchased 2 of them that were really in areas that were sort of average, kind of so-so, but they were performing relatively under. And, Jeff and the team, and we were able to come in, turn it around just by doing some simple renovations and adding our systems and really bring up the rents and overall NOI. If you're able to find other ways to value add, such as adding extra bedrooms, that's a huge way to really increase your bottom line. Simply by adding extra bedrooms, now you're able to charge a little bit more because people want to have private rooms. They don't necessarily want to have shared rooms. So finding space, within the RAL. Again, do not discount the management factor. That's going to be key. I mean, it's great to try to do it in other areas, but the need is right down the street from you. You could be living next door to an RAL and you wouldn't even know it, right? So I would even start there and see what the need is, because you might be surprised, maybe you have a need right there in your hometown. I got lucky because I'm doing it afar, right? I don't recommend doing that if that's the way that you want to do that. As long as you find someone that you can trust, like Jeff said, and really manage it on the ground, because you're not going to have time to go out there unless you're planning to stay there for a while or planning to retire there. Then it makes total sense to try to get something where if you're frequently going out there, all sorts of tax benefits from that situation as well. So you have to understand valuation, you have to understand cap rates, you have to understand what your returns are going to look like and projections. And remember, a lot of times when you get these P&Ls from these existing operators, they tend to hide a lot of stuff. They tend to hide a lot of expenses, or they tend to write this off or push money here and there. It's a lot of them are mom and pop operators. So you have to remember, like, they may not show their own salary or what they're taking out of there, but that's something you have to add in because you're going to be hiring someone and paying someone that salary. So it may look good on paper or it may not, you can kind of be fooled both ways. So you have to really parse out, what's happening there.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Now, what kind of are the ones that you purchased last year? What kind of multiples were you like either offering them or seeing in the marketplace as typical for the like based on their numbers?
Yeah, and I can start with that. So one of is everyone familiar with the concept of what cap rate is? Just raise your hand if you are not. Okay. So cap rate just basically is your net operating income divided by the price of the property or whatever the market value is. And really in the commercial sector, we've seen like cap rates are really compressed, meaning like prices are really high compared to what they bring in, right? So it's not uncommon nowadays to see cap rates less than 5%. In assisted living, we're still very fortunate to see that we have purchased homes like the example of those 2 homes that we purchased. They were from the same owner across the street from each other, by the way. I believe we bought them at a 12 or a 13 cap. Is that correct, Jeff? Yeah. Right now, we're looking at a very high-end property. It's about 3.3 million for this just one property. It's, luxury assisted living and stabilized. There's not much that we're going to be able to do. Like when we take it in, it's just almost like a turnkey. They've done a fantastic job. It's just a beautiful property. But even that is still at between an 8.5 to a 9.2 cap rate. So there's still a lot of good value in assisted living where you can still get these cap rates above 7, 8, 9% at this time. I think it's getting harder to get past 10. This year I feel, but you're still able to find some good deals and good value. And, by pushing up, by doing some appreciation things, you can really bring down that cap rate after you purchase.
Thanks.
So Sarisha asks, is there any anti-kickback statutes that prohibit the owner from providing physician services? And as far as I'm aware, there isn't. These aren't medical facilities. And, it's physicians can own skilled nursing facilities. There's no kickback against sending patients to that. Physicians can own hospices and home health care, so there aren't. You can provide services, but really when you have assisted living homes, I don't think you should become the physicians for these residents and you want to be an adjunct, you want to be an extra set of eyes and ears. But a lot of times these residents have their own physicians that they may have been following for years. There's also partnerships that you can make with mobile visiting doctors that'll come on a more consistent basis. So I think you should just continue to use them, but you can be an extra set of eyes. If you have background training in internal medicine, family medicine, whatever it is, right? You can leverage your expertise, but I don't think necessarily you should have to take on extra liability if you don't need to. And besides, you also have to look at what is my ultimate goal with this? Am I trying to find financial freedom? Do I want more time? You don't want to give up one job or just add extra work for yourself. Are you trying to be more hands-off, but be involved in your residents, but you don't have to take on that extra work and liability is what I'm saying. How many properties does per manager manage an MD senior living? So if you want to feel that.
Sure. So the state mandates that one manager can manage up to 2 properties as long as they're no farther than 30 miles apart from each other. And so we have a structure at MD Senior Living where we have the ownership, and then we have a director of operations, and then underneath the director of operations, we have our managers of the homes, and so that gives us the ability for us to have managers that are managing more than one home, and they still have plenty of support, and the caregivers have plenty of support as well. So it's been a good structure for us. But
Yeah,
2 is the simple answer.
correct. Yeah. And so just to give you an idea of our portfolio, we also have homes across geographically diverse areas and socioeconomic classes. But really the the policies and procedures are standardized across it. The caregivers are trained the same. So it's not like, it's just that it's just a function of where the homes are that really sets the pricing apart. And Jeff, do you actually want to talk about a little bit about the financial side and the financial returns and how rates are set and how what that looks?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things we could talk about from a financial standpoint, but just generally the rents in our properties, we have two properties that qualify for what they call Altex out here, which is really Medicaid subsidies, and those are sort of our lower end homes, and those will have anywhere from, we have a couple rooms that are designated as shared rooms. So those would essentially start at about $3,500 per month for a shared room. And the private rooms in those homes typically are going for about $4,500. And that's fairly, that's kind of on the lower end of our structure. We have other homes where they're starting anywhere from 4,000 and going up to maybe 6,000, and that's kind of our mid-range of homes. And then on the upper range of homes, excuse me, we have homes that start at about 5,500 and will go up to about 7,500 per resident in those homes. And a lot of that is driven by the neighborhoods that the homes are located in, what part of the city are they located in, and also some of the amenities. A couple amenities that are very important are bathrooms. So you'll see in a lot of the lower end homes, there might be 2 or 3 bathrooms in a home that's licensed for 10. And so you have people that are doing a lot of sharing of the restrooms. When you get to the higher end homes, it's more common that you're going to have a private bathroom that's located in each room or in the majority of rooms. A lot of times, so we have one of our locations has private bathrooms in every room, but they're all half bathrooms. So there's no showers in those, which is really well suited, and there's good functionality for how these homes work, because generally when individuals are entering a home like this, they're going to need some level of assistance with bathing or showering. And so we have in that home, we have one large, what we call a spa shower, where the caregivers, they have plenty of room to work around and to assist the resident in the showering process. But they still have their own individual bathrooms within their private rooms. So they have that privacy that they want for just having their own bathroom.
Perfect. Can you talk a little bit about, well, I'll field this. So if you're looking at saying, if you want a quick and dirty rule, one of the things that I use is, in real estate, there's a rule called the 50% rule. I think if you take operational costs, especially if you're starting out, just make it 60% or 70%. So let's give you a quick example. Let's just say that, the average room rate is $5,000 a month and you have 10 residents, right? So you're talking about average about 50,000. I'm keeping it super simple. I'm not even talking about including vacancy and this and that. But that would be 50%. So assume operational overhead of 60%, maybe even 70%. So, if you're looking and vetting numbers for an RAL, just take 60% or 70% and just say, okay, that's going to be my overhead to run an RAL, including payroll, utilities, food, licensing, streaming services, entertainment, yada, yada, yada. And really you're going to be left with about 20K, because that works out to about 30K total.
20%.
Then you want to subtract out debt service, your mortgage on that property. So had you bought it in cash, you're really not going to have any payments other than a little bit of interest, a little bit of taxes and insurance. But, let's just say for the sake of argument, it's about 7,000. So really you're left with about 13K. And that's kind of what we see average for a little bit of the higher end properties. You're seeing homes that are averaging about 10 to 15 on the higher end. And then maybe a little bit less than that for if they're on the lower end. So that's a quick and dirty rule. You can then, calculate your cash on cash return, right? So if you're buying it as a residential property, maybe you only put 20% down, maybe you only put 25% down. So you can really calculate that number from there. You can get your equity multiple, meaning like, you know, how many times of your money are you getting back over the years? So all these little formulas come into play, but you really got to be able to understand that, because you can use that to compare different asset classes. And I'm going to tell you, Jeff and I have done numerous real estate kinds of projects in the past, and nothing even touches the numbers that come from RAL. But, you know, you got to understand that this is not a passive opportunity. It's not something that you can just set it, forget it, or just rely on other people. You know, you have to be involved, especially when you're starting and getting it going. Excellent. Let me see. Are we thinking of franchising? Jeff, we just spoke about that. What were your thoughts on franchising?
Yeah, franchising this is something that would make sense for our model in terms of our capabilities and helping people get started. But franchising, I have some familiarity with. There's a lot of regulations in franchising, and it really takes a full team to make sure that you're providing the level of support for the individuals that are getting started. So there's a whole legal side of franchising, again, a lot of regulations. So I wouldn't say that we would rule it out, but at this point, we're not engaging in that because we've got a full plate with just really pursuing the growth that we're pursuing right now. And we like the direction things are going.
Yeah, we do have a couple of properties that we're looking at. The one in the middle right there is the one I was talking about. It's a very gorgeous property, but that we're hopefully going to be closing on in about 60 days or less. And I'll kind of give you guys updates about that, but we're already looking at a couple of more. We're finding that there's a lot of people that are selling assisted living homes right now. And a lot of people sell it for different reasons. The main reason being is that they're just burned out from doing it. You know, they've been doing it for, a lot of these are mom and pop operators that live in the home, act as caregivers or full-time managers. They really don't get to go out much. You know, we may not think about that, but they're there 24/7 or a lot of the time just making sure that this place is running smoothly, and they don't get to enjoy their lives. So some are just burned out. Some realize that there's just been massive real estate appreciation. There's been massive interest in RELs. So they're trying to cash out and do other things. So a lot of different reasons and variety of reasons that you may actually see that a lot of these assisted living homes, are coming on market too. So perfect. So we're going to be wrapping up here shortly. If you guys find this valuable, we'll do this. We'll do this with other team members too, like managers, caregivers, so you guys can hear other aspects. Any final question? Anyone else have any last questions? Jeff, any closing thoughts? Sorry.
Thanks, was really helpful. This was a really random question, but like when you identify a place that you want to buy and you've looked at, let's say they've sent you their financials, what is your next step? Because that's sort of like where I've hung up. It's like, just go tour the properties. Do you make them an offer, then go tour the properties? Like, it just seems very different from a regular real estate.
Right. Some will ask for a letter of intent, which is non-binding, but just shows that, hey, I'm interested. They may ask to back it up with your financials, right? So these are not uncommon. Like, we see that a lot. And the reason is because they don't want a bunch of people, especially non-serious buyers going through those homes, right? It's not even just a safety issue for the residents, especially through COVID, but also they don't want to alarm the residents. They don't want to get the name out that, hey, they're
trying to sell
the place, right? Because it can cause a lot of panic to the families. It can cause a lot of grief to the residents. They don't know you. They don't know us. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't have no idea what they're getting into. As it is, it's like they may feel apprehensive of trying to put mom and dad into a care home. And now all of a sudden it's like they found something and they've grown to like the staff and the managers, and now there's a management change. So a lot of it is just really done just to protect the financial info, but also to protect, the business itself and trying to get that name out, because if it doesn't sell, then they're going to have to hold on to the business. But now people know that, hey, they're trying to sell. So an
And-
LOI is
Yeah.
usually, it's not binding, it's not legal, it's, I don't even know why they do it, to be honest. I mean, like, but I mean, it's just like, okay, they made you sign it, so now you're kind of holding yourself to that standard, you know?
And then for financing these, are you using like SBA loans or are you just going to commercial real estate lenders?
Jeff, you want to field that?
Yeah, I mean, SBA is a common way that people they'll utilize SBA financing for these type of items. We have had success with different types of debt structure. So we've had standard residential loans that have funded these homes. Really is almost like just a standard rental type of a property. But I would say that SBA is probably more common, and especially if there's a purchase of a business along with the real estate, then SBA is a pretty good fit.
Yeah, if it's an existing RAL, it's going to be very difficult to try to get a residential loan product if they find out that it is an assisted living facility. So your best bets are really going to be commercial and SBA. If you're starting from scratch, like you're just buying a house and you plan to turn it into assisted living, then yes, we've done that too. You know, we've been able to get it. You know, obviously, we're not going to tell them that it's going to turn into a care home, but you do your renovations, get it licensed. You know, they're not going to care as long as they're getting their payment every month. They're not going to care what you do with the property.
With the
You know,
property.
hey, listen.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Great. All right, well, we're just coming up on an hour and a half here, so I really appreciate it, guys. I want to thank you for joining us today. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me, and I'll try to get back to you, or I'll field it to Jeff as well. Okay, and don't steal Jeff. Okay, you can't.
Thank
Can't
you
find
so
Jeff.
much.
I'm happy to answer
And
any
I'm
Thank you so
questions.
available.
much.
Feel free to send them.
All right, guys, thank you. And thank you,
Thanks.
Jeff,
Take care,
for
guys.
joining us
Bye.
on.
Bye.